Have you lost your job? Have you lost a loved one? Are you exhausted caring for your parents, for your kids? Well, you can find immediate relief when you read Sheila Mack's new #1 bestseller, Bootstraps and Bra Straps. It contains the Boots formula to move from rock bottom back into action in any situation, especially right now. If life has knocked you down, pick yourself up with Bootstraps and Bra Straps. Get your copy at www.SheilaMack.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila.
Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today we have special guest, Lane Kawaoka. He has been investing for over a decade and now controls 4,800 plus units as an owner and crowdfundaloha.com. He also does simplepassivecashflow.com and rayaloha.com. Lane is responsible for finding investments, opportunities, analysis, and marketing. Mr. Kawaoka obtained a BS in industrial engineering and MS in civil engineering and construction management from the University of Washington. In addition to an analytical engineering background, Lane has real-world experience in working as a project manager for over $250 million of capital construction projects in both the public and private sector. Working as a high-paid professional in corporate America and frustrated by the traditional wealth-building dogma, Lane was compelled to inspire and mentor other working professionals via his Top 50 Investing podcast, and simplepassivecashflow.com is where you can find it. All right, Lane, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sheila.
And this show actually came about after my best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. I wrote the book right before our pandemic happened. And so it's something, these things today, nobody could even fathom all that's going on. So I'd love for you to share, maybe if you have a time in your business or personal life where you experienced a difficult situation and how you got back on track.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started off on, the corporate America track as a project manager, construction engineer. Didn't really like it, wasn't very good. It was not a very good engineer, and didn't get very good performance reviews because I think I didn't like it. And partly because I was investing in this passive real estate thing, which we'll talk about today. And eventually it allowed me to quit my day job, which I didn't like, and kind of put me on the path of doing what I want.
Yes, that's incredible. So you started in engineering, and I actually started in the engineering department as well, as wild as that is. So I worked at JPL at 18 years old. I was hired in the engineering department doing programming and working with the engineers. And it was such a not good fit for me. I even got the carpal tunnel. My body was like, I don't like this. And, they actually ended up having me teach classes, and I did the OSHA safety training classes, and I did team building classes, and I loved that. I'm a people person. I'm not an engineer person or a sit at your desk programming person at all. And so that's something that listen to your body, listen to what you really want. There's always an answer, and there's nothing better than the passive cash flow for sure. I'm also an investor as well, and something that once you have passive income, it's kind of hard to ever want to do anything other than your passion for work, because the money is provided. So now you can go have fun and serve others. Makes a big difference.
I mean, often, we're put on earth, most of us kind of got to go and trade time for money. For a lot of us, that's the day job that you went to college for. But after you stop trading your time for money, kind of the world opens up, right?
Right. Yes. It's so different. And now our real estate market in the United States, at least, is ridiculous. It is totally on fire and above. Wait, they're going where I am 110, 115% above asking price is what's happening. And there people are paying all cash and negotiating these deals. So it's really hard for people to get in right now to investing. What do you suggest for people that are just starting out?
Well, I mean, we kind of go after buying properties in more secondary and tertiary markets for cash flow. And we kind of start off with this, this quick and dirty way of analyzing properties where you take the monthly rent divided by the purchase price. So we're looking for something that's 1% or higher. So for example, a lot of the places that, new investors will pick up will be like a little turnkey rental property that's $100,000 that rents for $1,000 a month. Folks out in Seattle, where I started out, and I live in Hawaii, Californians, you're probably being like, what? You can pick up a property that's under a couple $100,000 and have it rent for that much. So we kind of invest off cash flow as opposed to buying low, selling high, appreciation based. So for us, it really doesn't matter what the prices do. We're buying income streams. But it requires you to have some money to invest, right? Being a passive investor.
Yes. So now how would you suggest people go about getting that money together when they're just starting out, or setting this as a goal for something to somehow get into at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I can only speak for myself as a high paid engineer, working professional. I was making, close to six figures starting out of college, but I was really good at saving money, really frugal with my money, able to save $50,000 to $100,000 a year from my day job. To put to investments, to put down to 20% down payments on these $100,000 plus properties, and just did that for 5 years to get up to 11 rental properties myself. If you don't have money, but I guess let's kind of set the world right. I guess if folks out there you're in credit card debt, you don't make a decent salary over $40,000-$50,000 a year. I'm probably not the guy to follow, right? You don't want to go to simplepassivecashflow.com, because the folks that kind of follow me are, they have good salaries. They're good stewards of their money. For those people, there's a lot of different folks out there. Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, it's the save your money, don't buy things, don't use debt. But for those of folks over the paradigm and good with their money, making good income, the paradigm is very different. Right? Use prudent debt to buy assets that put money in your pocket to hedge against inflation, and kind of go on the offense a little bit.
Yes. And it is possible for those that think it's not. Sometimes there's creative ways to get started with house hacking. If you have a home or someplace you rent where you can rent out a room, if you can start paying some of your expenses with renting a portion of your property out, you could even create a dividing wall, make it very private. That way you're able to start paying down and building up your cash flow toward a down payment on something. And the beauty is, if you're investing in something that's 4 units, it's considered a home if you move into one of the units, and then you can have those other units, the rent that's coming in already, that cash flow that you look at, that rent coming in is already going to qualify you. That's going to be part of your income to qualify. So maybe your income isn't that much, but instead of buying a home that's not going to produce for you, if you get into something like that to start, you're going to be able to get the cash flow you need. And then once you have that paid down, you can build from there. I bought my first triplex when I was 18 and a half. And so I was kind of weird like you in that. And I was living in the smallest teeny little back. I don't know if it was even a legal room. It was like a garage converted, and I rented the nice parts out, because at 18, you really don't care. And I was going to school and working, and that I paid it off as soon as I could. And then I was able to build from there, and then have gift stores later on that first I leased, then I made enough money and I bought 4 buildings in California that were storefront, and they were all paid off by the store. And I did a lot of the sweat equity when I started out, because that's what you do when you need to. And it makes a big difference. And that passive income raised 6 children for me and got them all through college debt free, and beautiful private educations, everything that they wanted, traveling the world and learning from the top people on the planet was all part of that original sacrifice. So there is a sacrifice when you start. I'd love to hear your story a little bit more in detail about how you got started, what brought you to this at a young age. Here you are engineering, and somehow you got into property. What was it that sparked your interest?
Yeah, I mean, up until this point, I was always kind of brought up in a family where you're frugal with your money. You go to school, you study hard, you get a good job. I call it the linear path that a lot of working professionals follow blindly.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I got a good paying job, and what do I do with my money but buy a house to live in, which I don't necessarily agree with as good financial advice for some people out there. For those of you guys who are not good with your money, it is a forced piggy bank, so maybe it is a good idea. But the people that kind of work with me are the folks that are able to save 30, 40, 50,000, $100,000 plus a year. They max out their 401ks. Those people, in my opinion, should not buy primary residences to live in.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, invest the money and grow it faster. But I didn't know anything else, right? I didn't have parents that invested in real estate. I was not an accredited investor. I had accredited investors in my back pocket to kind of rely on as mentors. So I bought this house to live in, was never home because I was traveling all the time for work, as most young professionals have to do. And I started to realize it was kind of a waste of money. So I just started to rent it out. This is way back in 2009. And at that point, I got the taste of cash flow. The mortgage was $2,300 or $1,600. The rents for $2,300. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about the rent value ratio, the 50% rule, how you have expenses. All I knew is I was seemingly cash flowing several $100s a month. And that was a lot of beer money at the time. And this is where I quickly realized that, when I did the math and I realized how I was making money with tax pay down or tax benefits, mortgage pay down, cash flow, and appreciation, I was making 20 to 30% of my money every year.
Yep.
People don't believe me. I have a little whiteboard video on my website, simplepassivecashflow.com/returns, that goes over the math. But I'm like, well, why the heck would I want to do this 8 to 10% in my 401k? And then I started to realize this whole world is structured around all of us hardworking professionals investing all in this like Wall Street products,
Mm-hmm.
where ultimately there's a lot of fees and middlemen. And if we just invested it on our own, we'll be able to do way, way better and be able to be financially free. So that's what I did for the next 2009, bought the first rental, and then I kept on buying more. In 2015, I had 11 rentals or so. And then that's where I kind of reached a little pivot point there. And I realized accredited investors, high net worth investors, they don't really want to own rental properties. It got them up to that $1 million plus net worth point and above. But then I started to learn these other strategies that the wealthy kind of go by. And they're actually pretty simple, just
Mm-hmm.
very counterintuitive than what you normally hear out there as financial advice.
Wow, that's really interesting. So now I was that investor that definitely managed my own, but I had a management team. I have a team of maintenance people that I've worked with for so many years now, that they go out. If it's under, $500 or $1,000, they do the work. If it's something over, I might get multiple bids for some kind of repair. But for the most part, I could have 10 more properties and it's almost the same amount of work. Because of the structure of how I structured it from being 18 going forward in my life. Now I have kids in college, and beyond. So it's something that is really easy. Now, what is the difference between that and some of the other investors at the larger scale? What are they doing differently?
Yeah, so like I reached a point where I had, like I said, had 11 units, and I'm totally on board with get a property manager, right? Be an investor, not a landlord. You don't want to be running to your property, fixing stuff up like how you hear most people doing out there, right? But with 11 properties, I started to realize that you're going to have evictions. That's just how it is. With 11 properties, I had maybe an eviction or two every year, and then some kind of big catastrophe, a big issue like a tree falling on the house or a plumbing repair every quarter.
Right.
No problem. Property manager takes care of most of it, right? You're just overseeing and approving repairs, making sure they're doing it in a timely fashion. But with 11 rentals at a few $100s of cash flow per property, that's what, $3,000 of passive cash flow a month. Not bad. Most people would dream to have that, right? But most passive investors who have been doing this for a while get pretty spoiled. And you want something more like $10,000 plus passive cash flow a month. And to get that, you're going to need to get 30 properties. So now that exception rate goes up threefold. An eviction every other month, some kind of big catastrophe every 2 weeks. And this is where I realized I started to join different masterminds, get around other high net worth accredited investors, such as doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants. And I realized that a lot of these guys were investing in these country club deals called syndications and private placements, where they would pool their money together and go into much stronger, more institutional assets and get away from mom and pop investors buying, 1 to 8 unit properties, or definitely get above a purchase price of a few $1 million. And at the same time, staying below the institutional players buying 300 to 500 unit apartment complex. There was a nice little sweet spot in the middle where you could find good value add properties where a professional would manage it for you. Investors would come in as limited partners, LPs, therefore taking care of not having much liability at all as compared to having a rental property where you're the person who's going to sue at the front line. And also you don't get any debt in your name, as the general partners who are in control of the assets put the debt in their name on behalf of the investors. So none of the LPs get any debt in their name. So really the only problem is your network has to develop to be within the circles of these types of opportunities. Right? So it's become more of a game of not talking to brokers, property managers, repairmen, landscapers, but schmoozing with accredited investors so you can find who to invest with and, more importantly, who to stay away from.
So now for those listening in, can you explain the accreditation process and what the basic requirements would be for something like that? What is necessary? Yeah,
I mean, one of misnomer is like people think that they have to be an accredited investor to invest, which is not the case. I would say 90 to 97% of deals, if you go to the SEC EDGAR database, do accept non-accredited investors. And just to define accredited investor is essentially a semi-affluent person. They make net worth $1 million or greater, or they make over $250,000 a year. The definition tends to change a little bit, but essentially somebody who has some money, right? And unfortunately, the government blocks a lot of people that are not accredited from going into these deals unless they're in the private network of the syndicator or the operator of one of these deals. If you know the operator personally and the operator deems you sophisticated, not necessarily accredited, and that deal is not mass marketed to like a crowdfunding website or out there on the internet or a billboard ad or any other kind of form of marketing, they can take in non-accredited investors into that opportunity.
Interesting. Now, how is the situation with the 1031 exchanges affecting your business? And
I'll be honest with you, sophisticated investors don't care about 1031 exchanges. That's just for unsophisticated investors to exchange up. We love 1031 buyers because they're desperate. They're distressed buyers. And this is why no sophisticated investors will ever do a 1031 exchange. It's a different idea. What you do is, when I had in 2018, I sold 7 of my rentals off. I had a capital gain and depreciation recapture of $200,000, which I had to pay. But because I was going into syndication deals, which have stronger tax benefits, because they do what's called a cost segregation on the asset, which essentially is just able to front load a lot of the depreciation in the first year.
Nice.
I had several $100,000 of suspended passive losses baked up so I could offset that passive activity gain and depreciation recapture in the same year, thus negating the whole 1031 exchange.
Okay, so you were able to really capture all that loss with that without doing the exchange.
Right. right?
More.
I
This is
I don't know why people do 1031 exchanges. It's
yeah,
kind
this
of
is important to know because I wonder if is that still going forward with all our new laws, or do you know what's going on with that now?
I mean, I don't care. Let them have it. Let them, let the whiny babies have it. As long as they don't take away my bonus depreciation laws, which aren't going away until at least a
Yeah,
couple of years.
that's
That's all. That's what the sophisticated investors are really paying attention to.
mhm.
So, like, I think what's happening with the 1031 exchanges is that they're hitting people over $400,000 basis, but this is not set in stone yet. But
Mhm.
I don't think it's going to tank the market. I think it's just people making news stories over nothing.
Yeah.
People who are looking at those huge capital gains, they're not very sophisticated investors because they've been sitting on all this equity for often years. That's not what sophisticated investors do. They get to a point where the equity position goes up, and then they sell, refinance, or cash out refi, and move the money around and get it working again. Right?
Mhm.
Only unsophisticated mom and pop investors pay down their assets so their equity position is very high, and then wait for forever for the asset to appreciate.
Yeah.
It's different mindsets and different strategies. I mean, it's not the best strategy in my opinion, but I think it just showcases the power of real estate. You can have a bad strategy and still do pretty dang well.
Oh, you can. Just investing makes all the difference. I started gift stores later on after I left my job at JPL. And with the gift stores, I ended up buying all these other stores. And at one point, I went back to school to get another degree. And I'm sitting in the class and they talk about opportunity cost. And I realized, oh my gosh, I can make more money or the same as running the store full time. And this is 10 to 14 hours a day if I just rent it out. Holy smokes, and go do whatever I want. So I did it. I had this wonderful tour and I traveled the world for 7 years working and consulting and doing my passion. And I did love my store, but literally it was owning a job versus having that freedom. And so I had actually paid off every single building from running the store, and I was very frugal with everything. And so I was able to have a really good time and a great education for my kids with doing that. And then I ended up getting clients, having a real estate team and getting clients from the other store owners that didn't buy. They didn't invest. They were paying rent for 20, 30 years. And then there comes a point where they needed to retire or they got sick and they didn't have that investment. And they were paying almost the same or really more over the years. They could have paid it off and then had passive income or at least sold it in the end. So there's so many different strategies. And if you're not a specialist in investing and you're working with other people, doctors, engineers, these people that you're working with, they don't want to be the manager for sure. And so that's an important thing. It's like anything else. If you're going to get into the stock market, you want to get in with somebody that you know and can work with.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of strategies out there. The strategy that we like is we go after workforce housing sector. Housing for the lower middle class, a demographic where that population is increasing. It's kind of the divergence of the rich and the rest of us, right? And we target areas where there's emerging markets such as Arizona, Texas, Alabama, Florida, Carolina, places where there's good economic growth. We try and stay in red states because we like the landlord laws on our side. Yeah. And we target individual properties that are cash like currently day one, but there's some kind of value add strategy in there. So the ability to bump the rents up by putting a little lipstick on a pig, $4,000 to $6,000 a unit of dollars per unit to change the color of the appliances from that yellow dingy stuff to at least the white or the stainless steel type of stuff.
Yes, it is. So it depends on where you are. I mean, I'm in Beverly Hills, so the market's different. The rent there is astronomical, and it has sometimes the original appliances or really old appliances, original tile, no air conditioning. Not kidding. Beverly Hills, and that's the way it is there because people want to live in Beverly Hills. And so it's so different than what you would think. you would get for the amount of money. $9,000 a month, $8,000 a month, $10,000 a month to rent a small place, as a small little home or a nice apartment is very typical in Beverly Hills. So it's really different and interesting. But many other places you can invest in just some upgrades, and it can make a big difference in your cash flow. What do you think about the Airbnb and all these other movements with rentals?
I mean, if people want to get involved in niches, supposedly there's riches in niches, such as investing in college towns or military towns. We just don't do that. We go after the largest demographic, which is your average blue-collar workforce housing. Your average people making anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 a year. Typically, kind of white-collar, blue-collar mix at best. I mean, the problem with military towns is the military can ship out, right, or change based on what the government says. Colleges, especially Division I colleges or larger towns, they could just decide to build a dorm, right? And you're screwed. Short-term rentals, the government can just change some laws here or there. I mean, here in Hawaii, it's absolutely blocked. I mean, good luck trying to do it. It's not gonna cash flow at all here anyway.
Right.
I prefer for my strategy is mostly just going bigger to get away from the non-accredited or sophisticated investors pushing prices up, and to compete in things that have a huge base of demand. Basically, not get fancy, just keep it boring is what I try to do.
So now, an example, can you give me an example of maybe a deal or two that you've worked on recently and the cash flow that it produced and how that worked for your investors?
Yeah, so I mean, generally the way it works is we're picking up properties that rent anywhere from like $700 a month to $1,200 a month. So, this is not California or Seattle, right? So these are very depending who the audience is out there, you may be living one of these now, or you probably lived in one of these in your younger days, right? It's kind of your no frills garden style apartment where you might have a couple stories. You could be able to drive up to your unit. There's good value based housing, right? And the reason why we stay in that sector is in a recession, we want our asset to perform better in recessions, so that in recessions people move out of the high price areas, the luxury condos, and move to ours, right? Which offers good value for the price that they pay. Typically, we're picking up these properties at like a 5 to 7 cap. That means, without leverage, we're cash flowing right off the bat. But the way we make most of our money is when we value add the property by increasing net operating income, which for business owners out there, you guys know this as your EBITDA. And the price of your company when you choose to exit is based on your EBITDA divided by what is the trading cap rate for your asset. So for us, our reversion cap rates are typically in the 5 to 6% range. So if we can increase the price of the net operating income, we can capture that on the back end. So one quick example that I kind of give a lot, we'll do something real simple, like maybe there's 10 parking spaces out in front of the property, and we'll start charging $100 a month for that. So $1,000 of extra revenue a month times 12 a year. Times 12. Let me do my math again. Sorry. So 10 spaces times 100 times 12 equals $12,000 extra NOI bump per year. Now, if I divide that at a cap rate of 5, I've created $240,000 of value right there. I basically made 240 grand poof out of smoke right there. And then, there's a laundry list of things that we try and do across the property. We try and put in washers and dryers. We can also do things to decrease the expenses, such as we start to do what's called RUBs. So we basically charge back the utilities that tenants are using to decrease our expenses there. Whether we increase the income or decrease the expenses, either way, it has a direct impact on the net operating income. And again, whether if we change it by the net operating income divided by the cap rate that's how much money is in our pocket when we choose to refinance or eventually exit the asset.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, it's kind of like a really slow flip. That's kind of boring. But boring is good.
Because you're getting your cash flow, so you don't really care. That's all.
Right. And that's the beauty of the business plan, right? Should a recession come around and we don't want to refinance or sell during that time, well, we just chill out in cash flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Multiple exit strategies, sell when you want, and that's been the basis of my brand is like simple passive cash flow. If you're cash flowing day one, you can buy at any time of the market cycle. It really doesn't matter. You catch the trade winds when it pushes you ahead, and when something happens in the economy, like a pandemic or something like that, which we fared very well through a pandemic.
Wow.
Because it turned out people need a place to stay when population is going up. Like it's you keep on cash flowing, and then you do the rehabs and capture the value at the end of the day.
Right. Yes, that does make all the difference, and it's really important. So now, are you buying? This is just in a syndication then that you're working with your investors, or are you working as an agent? How are you representing clients?
Right. So I work as the lead syndicator, general partner, different terms for my position. But we work with brokers to go and hunt deals down. We only buy one in like 1,000. I mean, there's most properties don't work.
Right.
They're not cash flowing day one. They don't have the value add strategy. The rents are already too high. So we pass off on most of them. But when something does come up, we put a deal under contract. We get the lending in our names, and we kind of put the deal together and operate and manage it as asset managers. We'll often hire a property management firm to be our boots on the ground at the property at all times with their management property staff and their handyman staff. And then we kind of oversee and control them as asset managers.
Okay. And then for people that want to sell, they would then sell to somebody else interested in their position or portion of that investment.
Well, and this is a little bit different, like how wealthy investors invest. It's when they invest in these types of deals, they're investing in little businesses, right? But these obviously aren't legacy long-term holds. A lot of times the hold period could be a few years or maybe 5 to 7 years. And then one of my rules I have for a lot of my investors, and I tell them, like, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Diversify yourself over many deals, many geographic areas. We do apartments, but I also invest in self-storage, mobile home parks, office space, industrial. And you don't want to be in any one deal for more than 5% of your net worth, right? And then now we're kind of going back to another reason why those 1031 deals aren't that greatest, because the owner who owns that property for so long, I mean, they've probably got a huge chunk of their net worth in that one property. I'm an advocate for not having any more than like 5 or 10% of your net worth into any one deal.
Right. That makes sense. Yes, that's something for my own investments personally, I literally would look at hundreds or more before buying, but I always got things that I could see 40% increase right away in commercial or residential, where I was going to redesign things to make that much more in a few months. And that started at a very young age. So it's something that was a full-time job when I did it. And then I would cash flow from that for many, many years. And I was like, I'm good. I'm making money from this. And then I go invest in something else. But it was something you've got to have an eye for, or a team that can work with you. And so if you don't have that kind of time, that is a wonderful strategy to be able to connect with you. Now, there's only certain states you work with, or you work with all states. How does that work for those listening in?
I mean, we go out where the deals are at, right? And where cash flow is at. And again, I don't want to be investing in a blue state, because, not saying anything politically, but I would rather have the landlord laws on my side when I'm the operator and landlord. So a lot of the states that are more pro-economy, just for population growth, that's a big thing. The two biggest things I kind of look at from a data perspective are population growth of the individual city and submarket, and the rent increases, because that's an indicator of both population growth and job growth, and ultimately demand if your rents are going up every year. So a lot of those, the cities that we'll target are like Phoenix, Arizona, the whole Phoenix MSA. I am in a deal in Las Vegas. I know you mentioned there. It's a little bit of a speculative deal. Las Vegas doesn't cash flow too much. Right?
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of like Austin. Austin doesn't cash flow too much. I don't have anything in Austin. Not saying it's a great market, but a big criteria of mine is I got to cash flow. We're big in Dallas, Houston. Used to be in San Antonio, and then kind of making my way west to east. Atlanta, Georgia. We're big on Huntsville, Alabama. Used to be in Birmingham. I don't have too much in the Carolinas or Florida. Those are great states, but just a little too far from Hawaii for myself. And then a lot of the thing is for us is like broker relationships, right? And this is where it's very difficult for somebody to kind of just crack into the business, because brokers don't want to work with people unless you've closed 100+ unit properties in the past. And lenders won't give you a loan unless you have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac experience on 100, 200, 300 unit property. So it's an incredibly unfair game. And this is why we kind of like it. But yeah, we've got to have that broker relationships. That's how we get to the top of the list when actually these good deals come up, and not just selling it to some, newbie from California is what everybody jokes.
Yes.
Those are the deals that just get, go on LoopNet, right? Those are like where deals go to die. Is what the industry kind of talks about.
I remember when LoopNet first started, it was a big deal, and now it's different. But
yeah. The graveyard for deals.
Yes. A lot of times the real deals never really get to an MLS or a LoopNet or anything like that. It's done before, it happens pretty quick.
Right. The broker's number one concern is, can these guys close? Where is their equity source? They don't really care too much about getting the highest price.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So now, what would you suggest for people listening in who are thinking about getting started in something like this on a large scale or a smaller scale? What would you suggest they do to get started, or what would they need to put together to work with you or somebody that does something similar? I
would say get educated is always my biggest thing. I have a lot of stuff on my website, simplepassivecashflow.com. If your net worth is under $250,000, $500,000, you probably should go out and buy some rental properties on your own first. That's what I did since 2009 to 2015, as I didn't have much as I graduated from college. I mean, you got to get your net worth off the ground, get it to $250,000, $500,000. That first $100,000 is the hardest one to make. If you don't have it, well, you got to go out and do it first. After that, I mean, I would start off with a turnkey rental. There's a lot of properties out there that outfits will fix up a property for you, will even put in a new tenant in there for you. And great way to get started. Don't go buy a fixer-upper. Just get it turnkey. My free guide on that is at simplepassivecashflow.com/turnkey. But if folks are accredited investors, a little more sophisticated, feel free to reach out. My email address is lane@simplepassivecashflow.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Thank you so much. And now I'd love for you to share I always ask guests, when you were younger, what advice would you give to your younger self to help you today?
Never take financial advice from people who are not financially free. This often includes your parents, your family, your friends, your coworkers. For me, I mean, none of my friends or family owned rental real estate. None of them had a net worth of any significance. I mean, if you do things what regular people do, you're going to get what regular people get. What you want to find is people who've done this before, whether it's in the investing arena or like the business arena, like where you're at, right? You find the people who've actually had success and you listen to them. They're kind of rare, though. I mean, a lot of times time is the most valuable thing. And it's hard for somebody that is successful to kind of give it. But you need to, when everybody wants to give advice, right? Don't take it from the guys in the cubicle next to you. That's often the worst advice. And, they're all telling you to things like 1031 exchanges or like 401ks or buying a house to live in. Not necessarily the thing that you should be doing.
Mm. Yes, that's wonderful advice and so important. And that means, now there's podcasts, there's shows, there's books that you can buy to kind of get acquainted with some of the people that are master in their field. And then if there's a way for you to volunteer or help out, it's proximity is power, as Tony Robbins would say. And so that's something that's so important. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with other people starting very young, volunteering, where I was so blessed with the benefits of learning from them and saving thousands in mistakes that I prevented because I did that homework first, and it made all the difference for me. So that is definitely the way to go. And now again, to get started, we're getting to the end of our time. Where exactly do people go for those listening in?
Yeah, simplepassivecashflow.com. And I also have a podcast that's started since 2016, investing in real estate, simple passive cash flow.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you again for being a guest on the show. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. Stay tuned.
Overview of the Boots formula. In December of 2017, I lost my house, my car, and my cat due to a fire. It sounds like a country music song, but that was my reality, and yet another rock bottom situation. After a long period of doing really well, when we're able to retrain our minds to focus on the positives, we're able to enjoy more of life, even while we're rebuilding and rebooting. We're going to starve those negative thoughts, not feeding them with our attention, time, or energy. When you focus on the good parts of your life, those things that you can be grateful for in this moment, that energy will bring even more good things your way. Contribute and utilize your unique talent. You're not thinking about the problem at hand. You're not showing up for approval. You're just being your best self. You use your rock bottom to set the direction for your life beyond this rock bottom situation. It's important that you are really honest about where you are in this situation. You can't lie because you don't want to give up your personal responsibility. You have to own every part of this and realize it could be worse. It could be better, but this is it. If you aren't able to be honest about where you're starting from, you won't be able to clearly see where you want to go or how to get there. The next letter of Boots will help you answer that. The second O is for order of operations. The third step of the Boots formula is finding the order of operations. When you're in a rock bottom moment, there are certain steps you know you need to take to get out of it, and you need to complete those steps in a certain order. T is for thinking. The fourth step of the Boots formula is thinking. If you recall your thinking at the most successful points in your life, it's probably vastly different from your thinking when a crisis brings you to a rock bottom situation. Often, at the toughest times, our thinking goes to survival. We lose sight of the possibilities and opportunities that are before us. This is where thinking comes into play. It's vital to have a strong mindset in order to keep our boots on and walk out of a rough spot in life. Thinking leads you to a clear vision of where you want to go on that map of your desired outcome. You've made the decision that you're going to New York. Your bags are packed. You have an idea of how you're going to get there. You know the steps you need to take, though you may not know how the hell you're going to take them all, but you've made up your mind. That's where you're going. Tony Robbins often says, it's in the moment of decision that one's destiny is shaped. That decision is the thought that comes before the action steps required to reach your new goal. Everything happens in this step, in that decision. You can see it, feel it, embody it. Things start to show up because you're looking for them and you're open to them. You'll start getting the results you want just because that decision is in your mind. It becomes that real to you. Once you have that clear vision in your mind, you have to see yourself as if you already are living in your desired reality. You're just doing the steps to get there. S is for stepping up. The fifth and final step of the Boots formula is a literal step, stepping up. You've gone through the first 4 steps. You've decided how you're going to show up. You have a picture of where you're going. You know the steps you need to take, and you've made the decision to actually do something. It would be nice if you could just sit, think, and meditate your desired outcome into being. But that's not the way it works. There is some validity to the idea of manifesting what you want, but at the same time, you have to believe enough to actually go out there and take the risk. You have to overcome your fear of giving your first presentation, making your first speech, or writing your first book. You have to get out of your comfort zone, and you have to take those steps. S is for stepping up by taking the personal responsibility required for a real reboot. While the B in Boots is about being in the present with who you are in the situation, S is for taking those steps toward the future you want. Although there will be many times in life where we have little or no true personal responsibility for an event that alters our lives, it is always a gift to own your own response and reactions to situations. What can you do to shift the energy and step up to your part in the situation? In order to reboot, one must be willing to step into action. This last step ties back to the first one. It all comes back to being. How are you going to be when you're going through this? Sometimes it's ugly, dirty, not pretty, and certainly not fun. Nobody's going to help you move, so you have to pack all the boxes yourself. Procrastinating isn't going to help. You just have to take those action steps you defined in the order of operations. When you first start, it's overwhelming because you feel like you're still buried in the situation. Chaos is all around. But because you've done the first 4 steps of Boots, you have an action plan. You're not doing 1,000 steps today. You just have to take 1. You do the things that you mapped out one by one, and that helps you see, okay, I can do that. You have clarity on the action steps, so now it's time to actually get moving. Are you ready to strap on your boots and start walking? From rock bottom to moment of empowerment. You may be thinking, okay, now I know the formula, but what does it look like in action? Great question. Let's look at the rock bottom moment I told you about at the beginning of the chapter to see how I applied the Boots formula to get back into right action. After the fire, after my cat ran away, and after my car was totaled, I was in a funk for a week and a half or 2 weeks before I even noticed. I don't know if it was shock or depression or overwhelm. Probably all of that. It was a lot of loss in a short period of time. But then I had to go back to work, and I needed a way to get there. Being. For that first week or 2, I was being a victim. I grieved the cat, the car I had recently bought in cash and was very proud of, my house, and the whole lifestyle I had just rebuilt after the divorce, another loss that I had recently overcome. All my beautiful, most favorite things were in that house, and I lost them all. I was also grieving over the plan to have one of my children move back in with me while she went to college. She'd already been having second thoughts, but she didn't want to tell me and risk hurting my feelings. When I ended up in the tiny house in the hills, we both realized it wasn't going to happen. It felt like a really shitty place to end up. I wondered, how the hell did I get here in just a 5-day period? As I was going through my own rock bottom situations, I had to ask, who do I need to be? I had to own my little strength as well as my many weaknesses. I had to be vulnerable enough to admit those weaknesses in order to use my strengths to help me through. I had to own my truth, own myself, and trust that I was going to do the steps to get out of this rock bottom. I also had to take care of myself. I had a good reason to have a pity party, but I had even better reasons to get out of that funk and start asking, what can I do? When I was showing up with an active mindset instead of the pity party, it made a big difference. Orientation. Evacuating from the fire and the immediate aftermath was a terrible situation. I could have blamed the fire. After all, I lost almost everything. But that would have meant giving power to that fire and giving up my own power over the situation. Blaming somebody or something else puts you in the victim role. And I didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want to sit there and feel powerless. I wasn't in control of the fire itself, but I was in control of my reaction to it. I was in control of how I decided to wake up in the morning and what I decided to do with each day, how I wanted to move forward. After the fire, I had to do a big assessment to see where I was financially and to recognize that emotionally, I was down the hill. I was shocked and depressed. A lot of my friends had lost their homes too, and the fires were still burning. Everybody in the entire community was suffering. We were all affected, somber behind our respirator masks. Schools and businesses were closed, so children stayed home with their parents, who couldn't go to work anyway. People who had lost their homes were relocated to emergency shelters. It was very devastating. I felt for everyone around me, but I was in the middle of it too. To orient myself, I had to ask, what are my options? What are my resources? Who can help me? What can I do to help other people? Then I had to say, wow, I have to use that boot to kick myself out of this. Order of operations. It was during this stage of the process that I realized I had to use every single resource that I had. I had to go through boxes of stuff I rescued from the fire. I had to pay bills and file my insurance claim. I got a beat-up Nissan, really old and funky, that barely ran. The windows rolled down using a hand crank, and you had to lock the doors manually. Nothing was automatic at all. It needed a ton of maintenance, but it just wasn't worth putting money into it. I had to take the car up and down a canyon road, though, so I paid to fix the brakes and steering. While I was waiting for the mechanic to finish, I went and bought a fancy steering wheel cover and a bunch of motivational stickers that I plastered all over the inside of the car. I had it waxed and cleaned and made it the best damn beater car you could drive. I was going to rough it in style. That was when I started to get out of my funk a little. I knew that I had to focus on the positive, not think about what I had lost, and look instead at what I was going toward. I couldn't make it down the hill to the gym to work out until the car was fixed, so I got out my old rebounder trampoline and said affirmations while I worked out, which you'll learn about in the exercise at the end of this chapter. The neighbors thought I was crazy. I let other people who had lost their homes stay in the other units of my home rental, helping people who were just as bad off as I was, but who didn't have a mobile home to go to. I made space by shifting through the things I had rescued and donating anything I didn't absolutely need to other people who needed them more than I did. I felt better helping people than I did sitting around in my pity party. I couldn't get stuck blaming the fire for all my problems. There was nothing I could do to change what had happened. All I could do was figure out how to move forward and up-level by figuring out how to help other people who were affected and even worse off than I was. Just the act of getting up and doing something, being able to contribute and be involved, was empowering. Thinking. I had to have the thoughts, the vision of what life could look like. It was a lot of mind over matter. Anytime it got to be too much, thinking about my loss, I said, "That's silly. I don't have time for that." I don't mean to sound like I was always cheerful. I just kept laser focused only on what I could be grateful for.
Is not one size fits all, just like a pair of boots or a bra. So the formula is designed to help you through any situation. To grab a copy of my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. It is now available on Audible as well as on Amazon and Kindle and at www.sheilamac.com.